In this movie, we're going to take a look at how we can retrieve and work with server and request variables. Now, we've already seen some super globals that we can work with, right? We saw get, post, cookie, and session. Well, there's one other one that I want to introduce you to, and that is server. And that's where we're going to be able to find all of these server and request variables is inside the super global for server. So what we're going to do is ask that super global to return a value to us for various information, like the server name or the remote IP address that made the request for this web page. A lot of times we'll want to keep track of that to know where the request came from, what the user's IP address is. And we can do that using this server superglobal. Let's try it out and see some of the things we can ask it for. I'm going to open up basic.html, and I'm just going to do a save as on it, and we'll call it server variables.php and put it in our B2B sandbox, and server variables. Now the first three that we'll take a look at will just be simply looking at information about the server that we're on. We can ask for our server's name, for our server's address, and for its port. Let's try those out and see what we get back and think about how you might use that information. We'll open up Firefox, and instead of going to date time, we're now going to go to server variables.php. So there's the information that I have for my server. Now, once you install this on a production machine, probably your server name will change, the port, the address, those things will all change. Because I'm using localhost, it goes ahead and resolves the server name to being localhost, and my IP address is just simply listed as 1. There are a few other things we can ask for. We can ask it for the document root on our server, where all our files are located. We can also ask it for details about the page that we're working with, right? So here's some page details. PHP self. That's a very useful way to find out what page this is, right? Server variables page, or script file name. We can also pull that back. Let's take a look at those. I'll save that file. Let's just reload over here. Save the file. There we go. Reload it. So you'll see my document root. It tells me where the documents are located. And then the page details. It tells me the path to get to the page that's actually executing. And then the script file name, you'll notice, gives me the same thing, but it gives me from the root of the user's directory. PHP self is what's being typed into the URL bar, right? That's up here. The other one is actually the path on the file system. That's the script file name. So notice the difference between those two and make sure you use the right one in each context. If we want to redirect someone to a URL or something, we would use PHP self. But if we're trying to locate a file to include or require into our script, then we might want to use something like script file name or our document root, for example. Now, notice that document root here is actually not my user directory. That's because of the way that Apache is set up on a Mac system, so that my actual root of all of my web server is going to be in this library web server documents folder, not in each user folder. That's why I have to use this tilde and my username. And then perhaps most interesting to us, we can find out information about the request that comes in. So we'll switch back over here, and we can get details about the request. We can get the remote address that's asking for it, the remote port, the URI that they asked for, the query string if they asked for anything after the URL, the time it was made, the referrer, that's who referred them to our website. That's really useful for keeping track of links and finding out, did someone get to us by clicking on a link on Google, for example, or did they click on a link at Yahoo and that's how they found us? And then user agent, which is what browser they're using. So those are great for statistics and server tracking and that kind of thing. So I'll save that. We'll come back and we'll just do a reload. Now, of course, my remote address, since I'm doing it from the same server, is just going to be 1. But if we were to put this up on a server somewhere, then it would obviously pick up my IP address. Now, you notice that the query string is blank. Let's go ahead and just put in something here. And let's say, and Q equals 1 and N equals 2. And you'll notice that now it pulls in the elements in that query string, and we're able to then work with those and parse those if we need to. Now, we also have access to those through the get superglobal. Those will be put there for us already, and that's basically what it's doing, is taking query string and parsing it for us. But if we needed direct access to it, or if we wanted to store it in the database and keep track of it or something, we could also do that by just looking at the query string. Now, there are a lot of other server variables. I think these are the most useful ones. If you want to go to the php.net website, it's a little tricky to find, but php.net/manual/en/reserved.variables.server.php. And that will give you all of those server variables that you can have access to. And you can look and see if there are any others that sound interesting to you, anything you want to play with. But I really think that the main ones are the ones that we just took a look at. There's one more thing that I want to caution you about. There's also a superglobal called request. Don't use request. When you're trying to get those request variables, you want to get them from the server superglobal. Request is a superglobal that basically just contains all of those post and get values that we already have access to through post and get. So it's a little bit redundant. If you want to find out the remote address of the request URI, do that through the server variable, not through the request superglobal.